Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Digital Agency Insiders podcast. I'm so excited to have you guys with us. Today, I'm going to be interviewing my good friend, Richard Matthews, about his agency and a new kind of direction of his agency that I'm so excited to share with you guys. So if you're ready, let's jump into that interview now.
This is the Digital Agency Insiders Podcast. Inside, you'll learn how to build, grow, and scale your digital marketing agency, all from the comfort of your favorite coffee shop. Let's get started with the show.
All right, Richard. Hey, so excited to have you with us.
Glad to be here. Excited to be back on the podcast again. And excited for the new direction for our company, everything that's going on. Hopefully it's a fun time.
Yeah, so we've talked in the past. You're a good friend of ours. But I want to hear about this new product and service that you've got going inside your agency called Push Button Podcast. This definitely interests me because, we have podcasts. So tell us a little bit about the service and how you even come up with the service for the agency.
Yeah, so this particular service was born out of necessity for myself. As you know, I have my own podcast that is called The Hero Show. That's actually what I have this whole little fancy mini studio in my RV for that podcast. And I started that podcast something like 2.5 years ago. And Ben was actually was one of my first interviews at the time, a long time ago. I think he was interview like 5 or 6 on that. And I ran into a problem that I think a lot of podcasters run into, and that is that the part of the podcast that you like doing is recording the episodes, right? The actual, if you're recording yourself, talking to people, doing interviews or sharing your expertise, whatever your podcast is about, that's the part you like. Mm-hmm. And then when you hit the done record button, you have magically given yourself a whole pile of work that you don't like to do. Right. So in my case, it was editing the podcast and processing the podcast and getting the transcriptions done for the podcast and making the thumbnails for YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and all the other different things for your podcast. And then, after you get all the pieces done, then you have to actually go put them on all those places. Right. And so every single hour-long episode that I was putting together, I was creating for myself 8 to 10 hours or so of additional work. Mm-hmm. And I got about 8 episodes into that podcast before I was like, well, F this. This is stupid.
Just exhausted.
I was just exhausted. I was like, I can't do this. It's especially when, you're building a podcast for future value, right? You're building it for the audience that you're going to have and being able to turn that audience and that attention into revenue. But you have to put all this work in and all this time in ahead of time in order to get to that point. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, I don't have the time to do this. I still have to actually put revenue on the table now.
Yeah.
Right? So it was taking up more time than I had. And so I just let it languish. I was like, I'll figure that out eventually. So push forward 2 years. And this last year I was at a mastermind with you guys, the Black Level Mastermind. And one of the crew basically pointed out that my biggest bottleneck in my business was that I didn't have staff and systems in place to handle repetitive tasks. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you're right. So I spent the whole last year developing a bunch of processes for my own business. And I hired staff. At this point, I have 1 full-time, 2 part-time, and a couple of part-time contractors, looking at bringing both my part-time people on full-time in the next couple of weeks. But I spent the whole last year building all these processes for my business. And an overwhelming majority of those processes were focused on this podcast because I really, really wanted to get my podcast off the ground.
Yeah.
So we did that. And I, over the last year, built processes for booking guests on our show. We built processes for getting all of the content produced, right? So edited, produced, get all the final materials done, and then processes for distributing it for publication. So it happens all on the published dates, and then also processes for creating derivative content and promoting each episode. So we built all these stuff. I spent like $25,000 this last year in labor costs and process development for this podcast. And in my own crazy head, I was like, I have no idea why I'm doing this. I have no clue. Because my podcast at this point has like no listenership, right? It's still fairly new on the scene.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what I'm going to do with all these systems and services that I built. Roll back around to this year, get back to the mastermind we were just at this last weekend. And not obvious to me, but obvious to everyone else in the room is you have a service here other people would be really, really interested in. And what's interesting to me is that I had ideas for how I could turn that into a service, but it was very, very unclear to me. And so my first piece of wisdom is get yourself around people who are as smarter than you, so they can help you see through your own weeds, right?
Yes.
So it's a really big portion of that. But yeah, that's sort of the birth of the whole push button podcast system. Came from a long sort of story of pain in my own life and fixing that, and then realizing that I now have something that I can actually offer to other people and have the systems in place to actually scale that for myself and scale that for people who would be really interested, who are growing podcasts either already. Yeah. So that's sort of the birth of the push button podcasts.
I love it. So tell me a little bit, before you went to the mastermind, what was in your head? Did you even think of this as a service, or was this just something that you were going to keep in house? Like what was the difference between before the mastermind and after the mastermind? Obviously they saw something that you didn't. So what is it that you were seeing that was different than what they saw?
Audience. The difference was audience.
Okay.
And so what I was seeing, and this was one of the things that I think is actually really powerful that comes from going into a mastermind like that. One of the other individuals that talked at the mastermind spent a good time talking about knowing what your one thing is and learning how to think and act like a CEO. And going through a lot of the exercises that she talked about, sort of realized where my skill set comes in, like my zone of genius, so to speak, comes with building that systems and processes. So my existing business, my agency works with individuals who are experts in their space, and I help them do their branding, help them develop their courses, and help them, sell and stuff on webinars. And we do a really good job at all of those things for my clients. And so for me, I was building the podcast thing and I spent all this money into it. And I was like, I need to somehow recuperate all the investments I put into building this.
Yes.
So my thought was, a lot of my clients, one of the things they're missing in their business is they are missing a podcast, right? They're missing doing an audio and video podcast that's going up on Facebook, YouTube, iTunes and all the places to distribute that and actually create an audience, right? Because we're spending money on audience for ads, and then you can use a show to actually keep that audience's attention long into the future and have excuses to continue to reach out to them. So for me, my thinking was, I will help my existing clients. It'll be an add-on service and they will love it. And it'll be great for them.
You're going to go out and sell these
is,
people on doing a podcast that have never done a podcast before.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha.
So that was my thought, is these people have never done a podcast before. I will convince them they should do a podcast, and then I will make it super easy for them so they can just produce the content and it'll go great. And in comes the first big problem, right? So the big problem with that is someone who's never done a podcast before, if you give them a service that makes the podcasting really, really easy, so all they have to do is show up and produce their content. I've got a couple of clients I'm doing this with. I can tell you exactly the conversation they have with me every month, right? So they show up, they do 4 or 5 episodes a month, right? Most of my clients batch them at the beginning of the month and they upload them to one thing, and that's it. We take care of everything else, right? So they did, an hour to 5 hours of work, depending how long their podcast is, and then 50 to 60 hours of work gets done on the other side that they're not aware of, right? So the question they ask themselves every time the rebill hits is, what's the ROI on my business, right? Yeah. I spent this much money to have the podcast developed. How many views did I get? Did it lead to sales? Blah, blah, blah. And all those things are good questions to ask, but it's also building a podcast and building audience is a long-term play. Yeah. So they have to ask themselves that question every month for 2 years before they're getting to the point where they're starting to see the audience really, really drive sales.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a hard conversation to have every month. Now, contrast that with the audience I didn't see, which, is just my own mental block. That's why I suggest getting around people smarter than you, is people who are actively developing podcasts, who have been doing it for a while, been doing it for 6 months, a year, 2 years, and they already know the benefit to their business, but they also already know the detriment to their business, right? Maybe they're doing it themselves. They're doing an hour's podcast and they're doing that 10 hours of work themselves. Or they have one of their high-level staff members doing the minutia instead of working on high-level problems in their business, whatever that is. And the question that they ask at the end of the month when they see a rebuild, when you've taken all of that off of their plate, is they're thinking to themselves, holy crap, this is not something I have to deal with anymore, right? They have a very clear picture of what the value is because they went through the pain already.
Yes.
So that was really the clarity that I had, was who my audience was, and realizing that once you see who the audience is, you can build a whole marketing plan around that and see that you can offer a really valuable service to that audience and help them solve a big need.
I love it. I really do love the service. I know I say that a lot, but I'm like so excited about this service. It's going to save me some time.
So just on the flip side, as someone who's looking at it, why are you excited about it? Because you're in that second audience.
Oh my gosh, because I'm the one that's doing all the minutia stuff. So you're recording the podcast, you're editing the podcast, you're creating videos and doing the teaser videos and this and that and uploading. And it's like every week I've got all this stuff that I need to get done. And yes, I should batch it out and do all that stuff, but I've got 15 billion other things that I'm trying to get done too. So it's like, okay, well, I'm going to do this, just get ahead just a little bit. And then I need to work on what I need to be working on. Okay, I just need to get a little bit ahead and work on this. It's like, I'm never fully engaged in anything because I'm just trying to little by little inch my way up. Whereas your service is going to be taking it all off my plate. I just do the part that's fun, which is talking to people about their business. And you're going to do all the other stuff that I'm not the greatest at, for one thing. I enjoy small parts of it, like the video editing. We've talked about that. I love that side of it. But as far as uploading it and getting all the SEO stuff, like that stuff, I don't enjoy it.
And that's where I think the real value of the service is it'll bring the joy back to the things you want to do, right? So, I like to tell people you should only do what only you can do. Right. That's one of my mantras in my business. And the way that the model we use to build systems and processes is only do what only you can do. And if you've been doing this for any number of time, and I know like I did that, right? I was like, I knew for years I wanted to build this podcast. All the way back in 2012, I was like, I want to build this podcast. And because I just really enjoy the message that I have for that podcast. And when I finally got into it, I was like,
let's talk about your podcast for 2 seconds, because we talked about it at the event and I love the twist that you have on it. So tell us about that podcast.
So the podcast is called The Hero Show. And for me, it is literally just a passion project that I had no like business aspirations for. But what's cool is now it's actually going to jive really well with my push button podcast thing. So it actually has a purpose outside of just being cool in and of itself.
Which I think is great. You started with passion and then you built the business around it. So I love that.
Yeah. So my Hero Show podcast is built on this concept that comes from Ayn Rand and her book Atlas Shrugged, which basically the basic premise of this like 10,000 word novel is the idea that the entrepreneurs are the ones that hold up the world, right? So Atlas is the Greek god that holds up the world or whatever. And if Atlas shrugged and gave up on what he's supposed to do, the world would basically just stop functioning. Yeah. And I hold that mentality myself, that I believe entrepreneurs are really what make the world go round. And pretty much everything you interact with on a daily basis was touched at some point by an entrepreneur, right? It doesn't matter what it is. There's pretty much nothing that you interact with or work with today that wasn't touched at some point by an entrepreneur. So my thought was, I believe that entrepreneurs are sort of like the unsung heroes. Everyone is aware of and sings the praises of heroes like your doctors and your nurses and your police and your firefighters and your military personnel, and all those are actual real world heroes. And we should absolutely celebrate them. But one of the ones that never gets celebrated, in fact gets put down a lot, is entrepreneurs. And that's always really bothered me. So the show is really to celebrate the entrepreneur, and to I realized my audience for that podcast is my guests. I bring them on, and my goal is to help lift them up and help them see the superhero in themselves and what they're doing. So the concept of the show, we bring them on, we actually look at their story, and we look at it through the lens of the Marvel comic book superhero, right? So they have a multi-billion-dollar storytelling enterprise all about superheroes, and they follow a pretty standard formula for how they build the case for what a superhero is. Yeah. And that is essentially, it's your superpower, your origin story, your fatal flaw, your driving force, your common enemy, and then, your tools and your team that's around you, right? And so we talk a little bit about their own personal heroes and tools they use. It's a very fun podcast, and I love doing it. And so that's what the show exists for. And I realized that I really love doing that. I love doing the interviews for all of that, but I pretty much hated everything else that's around it. I hated booking guests. I hated researching guests. I hated getting the guests on the show. I hated setting up the Zoom calls. Like literally everything outside of the interview, couldn't stand it.
Preach.
Yeah. So I was like, pretty much the only thing I want to show up for the interview or show up for calls. So that's what last year doing was making it so I could do that with my podcast. And I think a lot of people who have their podcasts or shows, and again, this is not necessarily just iTunes podcasts, but like YouTube shows, Facebook shows, whatever, any sort of audio video show that you're building, is you want to show up and do that content. And I realized a couple of years ago when I started it that I fell out of love with the concept because of the work that came along with it. And I know a lot of people who struggle with the same thing. They get into building a show that they're passionate about, doing something and getting a message across. And then all the work that goes along with it takes the joy out of the original thing. And I can tell you over the last year, I've recorded 60 episodes of my show. And I've loved every one of them because I haven't done anything but show up for the shows and record them. And everything else has been done for me. And that's what I want to bring to other podcasters. I want you to have that ability so you can show up, do what you love, the end. We'll do everything else.
And everything still gets done. Just because you're not touching it doesn't mean that it's not getting done and getting done well. You're just not having to be the one to do it. So
exactly.
We may or may not talk about this, but do you know the pricing structure that you've got right now for this service that you're going to be selling to podcasters?
Yeah. So our initial market test, we're going to come out to be about $2,500. And what that'll cover is it will cover one episode a week where we will do all of the editing. We will do all of the post-production on the show. We will create the transcripts for the show. We'll create a written article piece, high-quality article piece for the show. We'll create all the thumbnails for that. So that'll be a square image, a wide image for your various platforms, and also a tall image for something like Instagram TV or Pinterest.
Yeah.
And then we'll also create the tags, YouTube description, all the different various like little minutia pieces that need to be done. They all get created at one time. So that's like the first workflow. And then the second workflow is we take all of that. So like that kind of stuff exists in the marketplace where you can get your podcast produced and get pieces back from it. And then one of the things that happens, every service that I've looked into that will produce your podcast for you, they'll do and give you back maybe your final audio, your final video, or maybe even the thumbnails, maybe even a written piece if they're really expensive, right? And then they just give you back all of those final pieces and say, here you go, have fun, right? But that's only, you're only like, you're only like a third of the way through the work, right? So the next piece is now you have to go and put all those things everywhere. So you have to download the videos, you have to download the audios, you have to make sure all your stuff is in the right place. Then you have to hit up 15 different social media services. Maybe you're fancy and you have a scheduler and that'll work with like half of your services. And then the other scheduler will work with the other ones. But anyways, you get them all put in, goes out and it's published, right? So even if you're paying someone to produce all that content for you, you still have to go out and do the work with it. So we actually do all of that as one piece for you. So when you hit the stop record button, that's literally all you have to do. And we do everything else, all the way to the publish and announcement posts for your show, all the way down to like we will, if you have an SMS list, it'll get announced to your SMS list. If you have a bot list on Facebook, it'll get announced to your bot list on Facebook. Every single time it won't fail because there's robotic systems in place that are making sure that this is happening and every part of it's being touched by and looked at by a human being as well. So it's a very unique service in the marketplace, I think. And I think it's going to be really, really helpful for people who have podcasts and messages they're passionate about.
Yeah. Well, and I don't think you even talked about the SMS and the messaging stuff when we were talking at the event. So I'm like, he's come up with more ideas. I love it.
Yeah, it's like I only shared like the process up to a certain point, but like it's more in depth than that. I didn't have enough time in 45 minutes to cover like all of the things that happen.
You need 45 minutes.
But yeah,
us all in the room.
So the next, if you're going to announce the post, you also want to announce it to any of your subscription lists, right? So if an episode comes out, you want to make sure your email list knows, your SMS list knows, your bot list knows, and those are all like little things that either you're remembering to do every time, or you're remembering to do sometimes, or you're completely forgetting to have, to do, right? And if you want to actually grow your podcast, those are things you have to remember to do every time.
Yes.
And we've got some ideas for like add-on services we can add on in the future to help people take that further. We haven't quite got there yet, but we're looking at building a derivative content service as well. So after the show is produced and done and published and announced everywhere, you can then take that long form episode and cut it out short form pieces, right? So create the 30 or 60-second videos for Instagram and YouTube and other places, create those little quote cards that you see getting put up places, and use that derivative content to promote it everywhere, to promote that episode. So we're thinking about having that as an add-on service. And then we've also got the systems in place that I'm using in my business to actually book all the guests on our show.
Yes.
So we're looking at ways that we can offer that as well, but those are still in development. But anyways, they're just, if you're looking at building an agency, if you've solved a big problem, you can also look at the smaller problems that surround it and see if you can actually come in and bring something of value there. And it gives you a good way to increase your average ticket sale for your customers, hopefully in a way that brings them more value, where every time they see that rebill come through, they're going, yep, still love that service.
Yeah. Well, definitely with the scheduling of the speakers, especially if you're doing interviews and not having to do that part of it, like that in itself is like so much time saved. So I'm very interested in that part too. So
yeah. So like my podcast right now, I haven't booked a single guest on my show. My staff does all of that. They do all the research. They do all the things. They guest post, or they get all of the guests on there, and they've done such a good job at it. My guest list is actually booked out for almost 2 years.
That's incredible.
So which is really, really cool. And we've had to we only book out about 4 weeks in advance because we don't want someone to book on and be like, hey, your show is in 2 years, right?
Yeah.
So we basically just say, when we know you're interested in being on the show, we put them on the guest list. So we have a guest list that is like ready to go. At any time we ask, we can just say, hey, we got another couple of shows opening up. Who wants to fill it in? So every time we open up a couple of weeks forward in the calendar, they get booked in. So that's what's going on with our show right now. It's been really, really fascinating.
That is a wonderful problem to have, especially for somebody that runs a podcast, knows how hard it can be sometimes to get people on, especially consistently. So that's incredible. So you went from having this idea for this service, you've realized that there's a market for it. You go out, like you took massive action in a matter of days once you saw an opportunity for this. So I want to talk about that just a little bit with other people who are like, oh, I've got this idea. Maybe I should go after this. Like, what gave you the guts to go and have that massive action to, oh, let's go do this. Let's do it now. Let's not stop. Let's keep pushing forward until we make this happen.
That's it. It's an interesting question because it's not necessarily like a motivation. It's more a realization of how you succeed. That's come from years of running business. And myself, that if I realized a long time ago, I used to think, and this was a mistaken thought on my part, that anyone could be an entrepreneur and build a business. And the reality is, unfortunately, that not everyone can. So the message for that came to me from Disney's Ratatouille, right? Where what's his name, Gustave, the French chef, says anyone can be a chef, and the critic actually comes through and he says, I used to take him to the cleaners for that because I used to say, not everyone can be a chef. Only the greats can be chefs.
Yeah.
But what he realizes by the end of the movie is it's not that anyone can be a chef. It's that a great chef can come from anywhere. Right. And I've sort of modified my thinking there that, a great entrepreneur can come from anywhere. And the reality is that if you are a great entrepreneur, great entrepreneurs see an opportunity and they move. Right. Because the difference between an entrepreneur and someone who wants to be an entrepreneur and is not there yet is action. Right. That's the difference maker. So I know that if I want to make something happen, I have to take action, and action that I take now is significantly better than action I take tomorrow or next week. Right. So I tell people all the time.
We were at that event and they just said, hey, this is what it should be. And this is what we should name it. And you're like, yeah, I love that. Within 5 minutes, he had the domain purchased and had the website like already up. 5 minutes. I'm not even kidding. 5 minutes.
Yeah, it helps when you have a lot of the systems in your business systematized, right? So getting
Yes.
a new website up with all of our framework is literally a couple pushes of a button at this point. So I mean that helps in my I've got a few years under my belt, so we've got systems in place that make movement easier. But
Mhm.
to that point, it is significantly easier to take a ship that is in motion and change direction than it is to take a ship that stopped and make it to start moving, right? There's a lot less energy involved in changing course than there is in going from nowhere to somewhere, right? Getting a ship up to speed. So I'm already in motion, so taking action and doing a small course correction. And in this case, it was literally just a pivoting on the audience of who it's targeting and an idea around the business model and how you'd scale that. So it's really easy to pivot and change courses and go that direction. But again, it's, you take those actions now, you move that stuff forward now, and you can start taking stuff up. Now, the other part of that is taking action is scary, right? So, and I still struggle with this even at this point in my business, where I'm sitting here like my zone of genius is seeing systems and processes. So when it's like when I'm like, here's the shift, and I see the course forward, I'm like, okay, here's all the places I can see in my system that I have holes,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't have a customer onboarding system in place for that. I don't have like a staff recruiting and growth, process in place, because I know if for every 4 shows I bring on, I'm going to need to bring on probably 2 staff members,
Yeah.
right? I don't have that system in place to do that. So I'm like, I see those holes, and my first thought is I can't move forward until I filled in those holes.
Yeah.
But that's also the wrong thought, right? You have to figure out what actions can I take now that allow me to have slow measured growth,
Mm-hmm.
and allow me to fill those holes in along the way, right? So just as an example, when I started this service for myself, for my own business,
Mm-hmm.
I knew I needed to bring on staff that would allow me to run my podcast. And I was like, I don't know how I can afford that staff. So what I did was I reached out to one of my existing clients and said, hey, I've got an experiment I'd like to run with you about a podcast service. And so I sort of explained my thought for him. This is when I was going for that other audience, right? I can help you start a podcast, and here's what it'll do for you. And I was like, I basically walked him through the whole service, what we'd be doing. And he's like, that sounds really excellent. What are you charging for it? And I was like, well, because I basically want to use you as a guinea pig. If you'll cover my labor costs, I'll cover everything else. So I had my client hire the staff that allowed me to build the systems, right?
Nice.
So I could take action and move forward without having to have a risk in my business, if that makes sense, a risk I wasn't willing to put up at that time.
Yeah.
And so you have to think about your actions that way, is how can I take action, and do it creatively, so you're not, putting yourself in a place where you might sink your business because you're taking risks, unmitigated risks.
Yeah.
So I like to find ways to help mitigate that, and move forward. So I know that's sort of what I'm doing here, right? Is I've got a couple of clients that I know will be very forgiving of me as I start this podcast service, the Push Button Podcasts, and will help me work through some of those initial growing pains, right? And then that's sort of the way I think about that kind of stuff is, you start something new, start it with people who you trust, right?
Yeah.
And who trust you.
Well, yeah, it will help you break it because it has to be broken,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it has to be broken a little bit. You have to see where the snags are, and then you fix them as you go along, right? Because you're never going to know if you don't move forward. And I could go through and say, hey, you know what? I need this customer onboarding system, and I build the whole thing. And if I wait until I build the whole thing out and then I put a customer through it and then realize that it was all wrong, it was just wasted effort.
Exactly.
So,
I love the fail and fail often mentality.
absolutely.
All right. Well, Richard, I enjoyed hearing more about this service. I enjoyed talking to you again because I always enjoy talking to you. So thank you so much for being with us.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
We look forward to seeing that Push Button podcast in the future and see where you take it. So we'll see you guys next time. All right, guys, I hope that you enjoyed that interview. Now, if you want to see more insider interviews of other agency owners, I want to invite you to join our Digital Agency Insiders Mastermind. Now, inside the Mastermind, it's for entrepreneurs who are ready to build a 6- and 7-figure per year agency and to be able to run it from a coffee shop. How incredible would that be? So inside of our mastermind, you'll get access to premium step-by-step training from Dr. Ben, as well as myself and some others about starting, building, and scaling your agency. Along that training, you're going to get behind the scene looks at other successful agencies. You're going to get a weekly live call with our team, and then 24-hour access to our team as well as other members in that group. And we're going to give you a free 2-week training. So to get into this, go to digitalagencyinsiders.com/mastermind. We'll see you guys next time.
You've been listening to the Digital Agency Insiders Podcast. For more tutorials on growing your digital marketing agency, make sure to visit digitalagencyinsiders.com.